Hi, everyone, and welcome to Media Capital, a podcast where consumer investing meets media innovation. Today's guest is Cathy White, the founder and CEO of CEW Communications, a leading European PR agency. Since launching in 2016, Cathy and her team have helped early stage and growth stage startups, as well as venture capital firms, tell their stories and gain media attention across Europe. Some of their past clients include Mondu, Sleepwave, as well as funds such as Aldea Ventures and Unlock VC. Before founding CW, Cathy led communications at Seedcamp and Tech Nation, now part of Founders Forum, becoming known as a go-to expert at the crossroads of startups, capital, and media. And in this episode, we'll discuss how founders can use storytelling and PR as growth tools and why press coverage can influence both customers and investors. Hi, Cathy. It's great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Diana. It's really lovely to join you.
PR, as mentioned before, is one of those topics where personally I was never able really to crack. I think there's a lot of strategies, a lot of insights, a lot of research that goes into it. And sometimes you're chasing journalists for a story, it just doesn't work. And then you just stop and then it just happens. I'm curious to know about your journey and how you started. You've been at the heart of Europe startup and VC ecosystem for years. What
Yeah.
made you go into this field? How did you find yourself at the intersection of media and communication?
In truth, it's all accidental.
As most
That's
things are.
as most
Yeah.
things are. I hadn't heard of PR when I went into PR, and I didn't know anything really about technology at the time. So back when I was 22, I'd just finished a master's and I'd done marketing, but my plan wasn't to actually use it. It was sort of additional qualification to tick a box while the economy was recovering, because that was around about the time that I graduated. And originally, I wanted to be in film and TV, and I love writing, I love stories, and that was ultimately where I wanted to go. But the truth was, I also wanted to move to London, and I needed a job that would pay the bills. I started hunting around, and through my wonderful sister-in-law, I got an introduction to a PR agency based in London that was looking for an intern. And beautiful words, it was a paid internship. And the agency happened to have a headquarters in San Francisco. So this was one of the earlier initial kind of startup and VC focused agencies of the time. They were trying to grow within the European ecosystem. And I was really fortunate I got the job. And then I was thrown into this world of young, hungry entrepreneurs, tech startups, early VC within Europe as well, because even 15 years ago, it looks dramatically different to what it does now. And storytelling and pitching journalists. So it was learning everything all at once. It was very much thrive or you're out. You might have noticed I like talking to people, quite sociable. Like I said, I'm a storyteller. So it all just clicked. And the energy and the buzz that was in London at the time, particularly around what was then referred to as Silicon Roundabout, it was super exciting. And I got just pulled in. And that was the beginning.
And that propelled you into Seedcamp or Tech Nation? Which one happened first?
I went to a couple of different agencies. I actually worked for a startup for a few months as well and got that experience. It was a mixed role of PR and sales, and I just wanted to do the PR bit. So we thought maybe I'd just move back into a PR agency, which I did. And then I went in-house at Seedcamp, leading on comms and marketing for about just under a year before this opportunity came up with Tech Nation to take on their head of communications role, which I did. And it was a christening of fire, because the week that I joined was the week that the UK voted to leave Europe. And so my role completely changed overnight. It went from celebrating UK tech to basically answering inquiries from journalists all over the world who had heard that the UK tech scene was now on fire and would we like to comment. I'm very pro-Europe, so I decided to accelerate leaving that role by 6 months earlier than I intended. And the plan for many years was to launch my own agency, and that's what I did.
That's a PR crisis right there. It requires a completely different skill set, mindset to deal with something like that, which is so unpredictable. There's one thing to create pitches and bylines and know exactly what kind of journeys you want to go after. But I think this is where PR, I think, is so important when you have to be always hooked and provide commentaries to And I think you should move to the US, by the way, because you'll get a lot of things to talk about. So many headlines dropping all the time politically, which definitely we want to talk about that on today's episode. But I think it's really hard. I think as a PR expert, it's really hard.
I think with something like voting leave, the additional challenge that you have there is that actually 52% of the population were really happy and 48% of the population are like, what is this? Personally, I love Europe, so I voted Remain. And then you're in a position as an individual where you're having to craft a positive message about something that personally you think is super awful, and balance what the tech industry is yelling at you as well, because within tech, there is a substantially larger proportion of people that will Remain versus leave, but you still have to include the leavers in the messages that you're sending out. So it's very difficult to juggle it. And mentally, actually, for myself, I couldn't. It was too much. So I accelerated that exit.
And I guess it must be particularly tough when it goes against your core principles, and especially in a subject like that. I think in general, it must be really tough to talk about something that you either don't believe in or you're completely against. But it sounded like the idea of CW has always been with you. And walk me through what happened after Tech Nation.
It was all very quick, to be honest. So the idea for CEW came up. The name, by the way, only existed when I absolutely had to register something on Companies House, and the other names that I really wanted were taken. The idea of starting an agency came up quite early on in my career. So I think it was very much because I was surrounded by loads of people who were building businesses. And while they're building the startup scale-ups and they're going after fast growth, being around people that were building something was very encouraging. And I was very fortunate, either a blessing and a curse, at the beginning of my career. Within the first year and a half, I'd effectively become the acting managing director for the agency that I joined. And this was just in a short-term period where the previous MD had left and they were still trying to recruit. And I was told to retain all of the clients, keep everyone happy. So I did. I steered the ship. We didn't focus on growth, but everything stayed as it was and the clients were happy. And then the person that came in to replace that MD role came in and it was a clash. We didn't actually gel very well and we lost clients, and it just lit a fire in me. In my brain, I was just like, I did that. I was doing that and it was working, but I'm not allowed that position because I've only got a year and a half of experience. So I thought, let's go get more experience. And then in time, at some point, the goal would be, let's set up and go alone. And moving to Seedcamp and then also Tech Nation was kind of part of a strategic plan on my part to build up a better network, a stronger network as an individual outside of an agency before then launching my own. And Tech Nation, like I said, I wanted to exit faster because of the situation that I was in. Setting up the agency happened really quickly. I did it all within under a month. Found the first couple of clients, enough that once money was coming in, I'd be okay. I could pay rent, I could live, and then focus on growth. And yeah, we did it really quickly and then launched in December 2016.
But essentially everything you built up to that moment, it really led to the creation of CW, because you have the experience working in startups, with startups, Seedcamp, a great early stage investment firm, Tech Nation. For some people that haven't heard of it, if they're outside of the UK, it was government backed. So you have that side of the coin as well. It's a whole set of expertise right there. And you knew, I guess, that you wanted to stay in tech. And I would love to talk to you about, because you work with a lot of early stage and growth stage startups. And I think PR plays arguably different role, right? Depending on the stage they're at. But you always knew that you wanted to stay in tech.
Even now it's still shifting because tech is such a broad term, right? Like technology is part of every single thing that we do. So in the years that we've been running as an agency, we've worked with some companies that are incredibly technical. So we're talking quantum computing, space tech, things where we ultimately have to learn to translate techie. So we work with scientists, professors, etc., and take their super complicated thing and simplify it. But then at the other end of the spectrum, we've worked with pet food brands, babysitting apps and sleep apps. And there's the consumer side of it as well. All of it's underpinned by technology of some form, but ultimately they're all just businesses with a service, a product, trying to get in front of customers. Where we're at now and with everything that's happening in the world, I had a baby 5 months ago, and with having her, there's a little bit more reflection on the kinds of companies that I would love to be working with. And so I think now we're shifting to be more let's look at health, right? Let's look at climate. Let's look at impact, just so that there's an additional feeling of that we're working with companies that are trying to change something, make the world better in some form.
We'd love to talk about both the brands you've been working with, what you're seeing in the market, and also funds as well. Some of the companies that we're investing in at Media for Growth, it's just this trend. I'm curious if you're seeing the same in Europe, that they come with celebrities on the cap table or celebrities are endorsing the brand. How do you see brands evolving their PR approach to integrate the storytelling? And do you see a lot of kind of influencer driven campaigns? How do you feel like PR has shifted essentially in the last decade since you started?
Hugely. And it's consistently changing as well. A viral story that worked 10 years ago won't work now. One of the big things ultimately is coming down to who your target audience is. We've got an increasing number of people that will get their news from TikTok or from Instagram versus a traditional newspaper. So if you've got a product that's aimed at 20-year-olds, why would you be bothered with talking to the Daily Telegraph or something like that? Like, it's playing around. Influencers, yeah, we've seen a lot of shift. We've worked with a few celebrities that have been involved in various things, and some of them have been really fun along the way. We worked with an amazing women-led venture capital fund and launched them a few years ago, and one of their LPs is Anne Hathaway. The headline writes itself. The three women that have built this fund, they've got incredible stories, and they built it while they've had their families. It's a very different story. Similarly, worked with another VC fund where one of the partners is the celebrity. Managing that announcement, his challenge was, I don't want to be everywhere. I just want to be in one or two places. And the strategic element that comes through, it's, I don't want people to run away with the story. I want to have control of what we're saying. And then we've had like equitable partnership type deals with influencers where they're doing videos and pushing the product on social, etc. It's changing a lot. The big one that, people are talking about more and more, and it's really important right now, is media, and a lot of publications are dying. Just in this current market, there's less advertising spend, less people willing to basically support media because there's too many different channels to play with and everyone's being very aware of where they put their money. So it means some publications are dying, which is horrible, and hopefully it will stabilize at some point. But at the same time, we have this massive rush of people using AI solutions, whether it's ChatGPT, Gemini, etc., to find products or services that fit the problems that they have or find out information. And most of the sources that those services then cite is media. So if you want the proof point as a business, or you want to come up in these searches, you need to start thinking about what's being referred to as LEO or GEO. And so, yeah, PR's got another reason for it to exist again, which is great, but in a much more challenging environment.
PR is obviously a fundamental different layer, but if I think about print and the evolution of print, and I don't think that's what print is evolved into a digital channel, but that trust, the authority that comes with, we have, for example, one of our brands, Kayaks, they're actually a Switzerland-based company that we helped launch in New York, and having a brand editorial content with New York Post and what we're doing with New York Post at the moment, that paper, which is iconic to New York, has evolved massively. But as a channel, I don't think that would ever go away because it just makes such a huge difference, especially to an early stage brand as you build your brand. And this is what I would love to know from you, because you probably get a lot of requests, and I'm curious, what are the things that you wish founders knew more about, maybe the game of PR when when they start with you? Because I suppose some of them will be, I want to be in Forbes, I want to be in TechCrunch. I don't know if there's necessarily sufficient rationale behind that, and I'm curious how you push against this. Or we get that with Super Bowl, just to give you an example, right? Everybody thinks
Yeah,
about,
I bet.
we got to be in Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Why? What exactly are you trying to achieve? Who are you trying to reach? Do you want to spend $50 million for a ad spot, essentially? For what? What's the end game? So I'm curious what things you wish you've seen more in brands when they start thinking about PR and working with you.
It is actually really similar to what you just said. So it's very common for us to get, oh, we just want TechCrunch. And I've had calls with founders where you're bidding for the work and they go, okay, so we're just looking really for TechCrunch coverage. They will explain what the story is, and you can tell straight away it's not a TechCrunch story. And actually, more often than not, for some founders, they've just been told by their investors that they need TechCrunch. And you can talk to the investor, and similarly, you go, why? What is the reasoning? What is the objective? So with anyone that we work with, the first question ultimately is, what are you trying to achieve? And there's always going to be more than one objective, and the priority objective will shift with time. But it's that educational piece, right? Particularly in this day and age right now, with TechCrunch has exited Europe. There's one journalist who's freelance writing for them who is effectively covering the European scene, and she writes a handful of articles each month. That's a lot of European companies chasing one journalist for maybe 4 articles in a month. The math ain't mathing, basically. What is the objective? Who are you trying to reach? What story do we need to tell to reach them in the right place? When do we need to tell this story to get it out there at the right time? And also, if you do PR well and it pays off, you get a reward for that. So, what is the return on investment that you're looking for? Is it you're simply just trying to build more credibility and trust? Do you want people to be discovering you and starting to come through the funnel? Is it for raising investment? And that's where you really need to measure the success of PR. There's a lot of numbers within public relations, which are vanity metrics. We can use them, but I don't think they're worth anything. The real thing of worthy is, what is the result that you're getting, the actual result that you're getting from this. The other big thing is when you're starting to talk to investors for the first time, you're going out to market and you're raising. The first thing you have to convince, particularly as an early stage company, is you've got to convince them that you and your team are the one to build whatever it is that you're building. And similarly with journalists, you've got to educate them and you've got to explain to them why you are not another competitor. The educational phase is equally as important as when you're going out to investors. And so the best results come with time. And it's frustrating in PR, like it is, because you can talk to a journalist, you can do all of the work, but for some reason, the timing's not right. And then you stop doing everything. And 6 months later, you get someone calling you out of the blue and you're like, oh, cool, it's Forbes.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Exactly. There are always these hypes in the market, right? Whether now it's toning down, although you see the word AI in every press release, although probably it shouldn't be there. But I think more so like a couple of years ago, every headline, I don't think there were journalists that were looking at anything that didn't have AI in the story. And depending where you are, depending on the times, of course, there's a lot of political headlines, tariffs, right? The whole start of the year. How do you break into a journalist mindset to go against the tide in a way and write about something that may not be as popular or timely? Because I think that's really hard. The span of attention and what people really are chasing, it's a business in the end, right? So you got to make money out of it. So how do you make a journalist look beyond what's obvious?
You hope, quite frankly, that journalists are looking at the thing that is beyond the obvious, right? Because particularly within the tech industry and the tech journalists that we work with, yeah, fine, there's going to be the big trend pieces that are happening right now, but technology is consistently evolving by nature. So you want to be as far forward thinking as you can be to get the most interesting story. You have to remember with journalists as well that ultimately they're in competition with not just other publications, but also sometimes with their own colleagues, right? Because the
Yeah.
more that they can show that their work is being read and that it's then connected to revenue, the better. With everything that we do, generally speaking, less is more. So rather than approaching 50 publications, you hone in on the really important ones. And that could be what we call tier one medium, right? So things like the FT, NYT, blah, blah, blah. There's a level at which you can get to them, but it's hard work. Then there's your trade media, which is super important. And then there's thinking about new channels, particularly now, like Substack newsletters, podcasts. So there's so many content creators now. There's lots of very niche audiences out there for you to go to. It's research. I think one of the most frustrating things, and it's our job to do this, but you wish that your customers would do it as well. Bluntly, read the news that your customers are reading. Watch it, read it, listen to it. Our job is to be hyper aware of what's going on. That means that we've got to be up to date on everything. And clients can do similar. If you're founding a company, you want to be watching all of this stuff too, because it impacts your business. And then you'll see things that come up and you can layer on a story and take that new angle, impress a journalist, give them something special that you're not giving someone else, give them early access.
Speaking about, do exclusives still work these days?
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
But again, like exclusives work if the story is a story that they really want, right? It's still ultimately going to come down to the value of what you're offering them, not just the
Yeah.
exclusivity.
When you're just getting started, what's your opinion on going via the wire? When you just create your company, you've just got, let's say, an MVP, or even maybe you're further down the line, but you haven't really used PR strategically. You lose that control, but potentially could help.
I personally am very negative on newswires. You can use them, no problem, go for it. But a newswire effectively is doing a spray and pray method. I think if you even want to do PR on your own, it's stronger to hone in on the 3 or 5 journalists that you really should be building a relationship with and go super bespoke on how you pitch them. So what's the specific angle of what you're offering that works for them? And that just comes through bluntly stalking them on the internet and reading stuff that they've written recently. Journalists do respond to very tailored pitches where you've taken the time, and they do want to build relationships. If they see that there's an opportunity here, this person or company could be valuable to me in the future, they'll make the time. So I would go hyper focus. And ultimately, at the end of the day, even without a wire, if you don't get very far with journalists or with getting a few media publications to cover it, self publish it, right? Any business and person right now can be a content creator. So PR is not your own channel. You still have control of that narrative and you have more control on your own channels than you do through PR. The strategy's got to be wider than just the news piece.
One thing that I've seen, so we have founders that would like to raise from MFG, and I've seen this actually happening more recently. I think it's such a clever way for a fund to keep the founder in mind, and you remember them because they helped or they've given you something without asking anything in return. But essentially, obviously, what they want to do is just to get closer and get to know each other. But we have founders that they share other founders with us, or they introduce us to very strategic people before we even get into an investment conversation. And I think it's in a way the same with PR. You got to give that journalist something to work with. You got to understand their editorial schedule. How can you make their life easier before you start pitching your story? Is there I know I'm asking probably like a blueprint that probably will never exist, but is there a specific tactic that you felt like it worked to approach a journalist? Is it like the headline? It's the subject line in the inbox? Is it about studying their editorial schedule, seeing what's coming up? Is it meeting them at events in order to start building those relationships? What do you feel that works better?
Honestly, it's a combination of everything because, again, it's really difficult to say that there are fixed rules when what we're talking about is people interacting with each other and every person is different. So, even with journalists, the way that they like to receive news or talk to their sources or interview people, it can vary wildly. So there's some journalists out there are very introverted and they would much rather do things over email completely. There are others that phone me if you know me, we'll have a chat, it's easy. So there's no fixed rules. But I think generally speaking, the one overarching rule that you can take is actually what you already said, which is make it as easy for them as possible. If the journalist has to work to get the story, they're not going to do it. So the subject line you use on an email, it has to be attention grabbing. It's got to be succinct. It's got to focus on the stuff that journalist is going to see and go, yes, I have to open that. So for really early stage companies, I always say never put the name of your company in the subject line because it's wasted space. Your name literally means nothing. Equally, if you're trying to make a specific offer, like an exclusive or interview, put that as the first word. Or if it's news that's going live on a particular day, put the date as the first thing. And then just focus on honing that subject line so that it's going to click for that individual's brain. And then similarly, that email that you send, it does not need to be an essay. It needs to be key, quick bullet points to see if they're interested, make it really clear, and then hit send. If you meet people at events, that's great. You can get introductions, that's great. But ultimately, it's about getting their attention and making sure that what you are sharing with them is relevant.
Do you attach press releases?
Absolutely not. No, no. Yep. So we're going to just really quickly explain this because it's very important. If you're pitching a press release, you're making an announcement of some form ultimately, right? you want to have control over the day in which that's going to go live. And so you would normally set an embargo. The embargo is the date and the time that piece will be open to the world and anyone can cover it. Great. Now, if you pitch a journalist, technically by definition, they have to accept the embargo before you share the press release. If you do a pitch and you send a press release, they can do whatever they want. It's not a written rule that they have accepted the embargo because you've put embargo on the press release. They
Yeah.
can do whatever they want. Also, they hate attachments.
Yeah.
Attachments
Sure.
are more work. So yeah, if you do anything, whack it in the body of an email and
Yeah.
have a digital press kit link available somewhere with assets. Photos, equally, really important. Always think about what's going to go alongside the words. If you don't think about it, they will, and you will not like the outcome.
True. I also think a lot, not just in PR, but in general, people obviously are so careful about downloading any attachments these days. Kathy, I'm curious, just shifting gears to investors. You work with Seedcamp, you also work with other funds in Europe, Aldea Ventures as well. And we talked about this before we started recording. And for me, I remember because it has such a reputable name now in the market, it's a very successful fund, but it also has a very interesting PR story. And we talked about Andreessen and essentially how they used PR back in the days to get their name out there when they were just raising the fund. And I think it was also because VCs back then were not using the channel as much. It was quite low key. What have you noticed about VCs using media, and not just PR, but media in general, to get their name out there to raise potentially a fund, which is particularly challenging, I think, in today's market?
Yeah. First of all, on the VCs talking publicly while raising a fund, you've got to be very aware of the solicitation, right? So if you're doing it in the US, you can't be seen to be marketing that you are raising a fund, but there's nothing that stops you from just talking about investing, investments, what you're seeing in the industry, etc. So most VCs that we've worked with and a lot of VCs that I know, I mean, the main reasons that they use PR, it typically is partly deal flow in some cases, right? If you're not an Andreessen, you want your name out there in order to attract the best founders and to be seen by other VCs that maybe share deals. And then you also want to be visible to LPs and in some cases talent. It's a massive change. When I joined Seedcamp, and we're talking back 10 years ago now, Seedcamp was one of the early firms in Europe to have a platform team. So you had myself, someone doing community, someone managing events, someone doing talent, and it was a very new concept. And today, a lot more VCs, once they've reached a certain level in terms of their funds, they will have a platform team. They'll have someone doing comms, marketing, or something. And it just means that, again, like with startups, there's just a hell of a lot more competition for placing stories. I think Europe now has something crazy like more than 3,000 funds, something like that. Like it's mad. And there's only so many stories that Sifted will write every day that involve a VC for commentary. And not all
Sure.
3,000 are doing PR. Actually, there's some funds out there that take the very smart decision to not do PR. They become mystery funds. It's very sleuth. The industry is full. There are a lot of people out there that want to talk. It's very hard, I think, for VC especially to have a very clear differentiator, USP that stands out when talking to press, because I think most funds would say that they're for the founders and they care and all of this. The one thing that I don't think personally enough VCs do consider is that actually as an industry, it can be very gossipy and founders also talk. So when founders have bad experiences with VCs, that can make its way back to journalists and it makes its way back to others. And so bad actors are recognized. And so if you're coming out publicly and doing good things on the PR side, but negative things in reality, it can come back to bite you in the arse. So my kind of message here is ultimately do everything from a place of authenticity. Don't do it just purely as a PR marketing exercise.
And arguably, as you mentioned, your portfolio companies are your lever to really good
Yeah.
PR. I guess if you invest in really
Yeah.
good companies, if you're doing a fantastic job, if the founders are happy, I'm thinking of, I mean, there's just so many funds out there, really good funds. Letter Hippo, for example, here in the US, they just closed, I think, their fifth fund, and half of that was actually backed by previous founders. I think that just says a
Yeah.
lot about the pedigree of a fund. I'm curious what funds you look up to or you think they're doing a good job. And also, this is a very nice transition into we have this shout out moment. And I'm curious if there's perhaps a fund or a client or somebody that made a difference in your journey to where you are today. And if you would like to give a shout out to and why. Two questions there. Sorry. So we can
It's
maybe
okay.
start with the fund. Yeah.
So I think this one's actually more recent, but I have to give a shout out to Carlos Trench. So Carlos is one of the original founding partners for Aldea Ventures, but he's now the co-founder of a new fund in Barcelona called Masia. And my company's British in London, but I live in Spain. I've been in Barcelona for 6 years, and Carlos has been incredibly generous with connections to others in the city. And I think what he and Pepe, his co-founder, are doing with Masia is very clever for Barcelona right now. So in the 6 years I've been in the city, it's shifted loads. You've had loads of funds moving in, some really exciting companies coming to be set up there. Plus, you've got businesses like Glovo who have scaled significantly and are fast becoming like Southern Europe's fastest growing company and unicorn. And with Masia, what they're trying to do, or they are doing, is they're building an angel fund which will invest into Barcelona based companies alongside other VCs from around Europe. So they want to back talent that has decided that Barcelona is its home. So that could be someone born and bred Barcelonian, could be someone who's moved there by choice and is building something super exciting. So effectively, Barcelona is starting to invest in the next generation. And yeah, Carlos has just been super generous with me and he's a lovely man.
Awesome. And it also sounds like an amazing place to be, frankly.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it already attracts a lot of tech talent in a way similar Lisbon has done over the years. And I think initiatives like that is just only going to increase the ecosystem even further. I'm curious, and I know it's a very broad question, and we can find a way to maybe break it down slightly. But I'm curious about your big learnings working with agencies, working in the funds, starting and growing CEW. Where do you see the industry going? What has shifted? What would you say was kind of your big aha moment in this last few years?
Ooh,
Yeah, I know it's a big question.
I think it's probably one that's more recent rather than in the last few years. It ties back to what I mentioned earlier with having had a baby girl this year and just the state of the world right now, the awful genocide that's going on with various different, sorry to audience listeners, whoever voted for him, everything that Trump is doing that impacts people that aren't like Trump. It scares me. And I think technology as an industry, there is a lot of opportunity for tech to play a role in significantly improving and bettering the world. And I think as an industry, we all need to be more aware of that rather than it just sometimes feeling like we're going for the money grab. And with having had Annie, I think now personally, my aha moment is I want to make sure that the businesses we work with are leaving the world in a better place and just create more joy. So yeah, that's my aha moment. With building an agency, I'd love to say that at some point in the future we'll be a big agency and we'll be doing really well. But it's hard. And in this climate, it's particularly very hard. And I think more joy, more good, just like a big thing that everyone needs more right now.
It's interesting you said that. I deliberately subscribe to Nice News. In fact, there's a
Yeah.
newsletter called Nice News, which was started by, I think there's three women, very well written, curated. But it literally does what it says. Every morning you get just a fresh series of nice news, whether it's about people's lives or a new discovery or medical advancements. And it's just my kind of 5 minute daily dose of just thinking that we're not doomed. There's still a lot of really good things happening out there in the world. And I think what you're saying, Kathleen, have you seen headlines literally shifting more towards a negative view over the last few years? Just
Yeah.
my sense, and I'm not necessarily obviously in the industry like in PR, but as an outside observer, that's what I see.
It's really tricky, right? Because I think, and I'm not an expert on this, and I do not have statistics that I can whiz off. So this is just my take. But as human beings, we can sometimes migrate towards the negative, right? This is a more fun example, right? But the CEO caught at the Coldplay concert with the woman from HR he was having the affair from, and that went absolutely viral and
Yeah.
mad. And we're still talking about two human beings. Yes, they made a decision and yes, they've got caught and that's on them. But then this bigger impact around the whole thing, so many people, brands, we've all gone towards that story. We're attracted to that gossipy, negative, sensationalist, blah, 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 blah. And if you think about the number of media titles that would have written about that, number of people that would have played for it with their brands, that moment has created so much value, monetary value. We are attracted to the negative. And so therefore for media, why wouldn't you do something in that vein that brings people to you and the money kind of flows from there? And
Yeah.
wouldn't it be so wonderful if there was just a hell of a lot more positive news and we were all like, yes, I absolutely need to go and read those 10 headlines about how things are amazing right now.
It's tough, isn't it? And I think we can talk about this for another hour, just about the balance between money making and integrity and quality
Mhm.
media. Because there's a lot of money, I'm sure, in tabloids and stories like that, because that's what people chase, right? And you're capturing people and a certain type of people. At the end of the day, you might not read The Economist at 10 p.m., but it's just not, again, as you said, it doesn't move the society or yourself in a better place in any form of shape. It's interesting how I think media altogether is changing and we're so hooked on what's happening online. And there's trends like, I think they're probably going to make their way to the US. And if they work in the US, I'm sure UK is going to be next. Coming from China, you might have seen this idea. It's not new, the shorts, the reels. Obviously, they've been around for a while with TikTok, but translating that into movies and soap operas.
Yeah.
So consuming
Mhm.
a whole episode or a movie in 2-minute videos. And people are absolutely hooked on that. Obviously, the quality is questionable because they're
Yeah.
forcing different cliffhangers just so that you can consume the next one and the next one, right? It's not about producing more quality content, it's just producing a lot more in a more digestible
Yeah.
format.
So I have actually downloaded one of those because I was curious. Yeah, because
Yes.
again, like you said, it's this new format. You want to see it to understand it. The particular genre I've gone for is more in the kind of saucy romantic vein because I've got a baby girl and I need to find my mojo again. They are weirdly addicted. You're right, the acting's not great,
Yes.
the quality's not very good, but the cliffhanger does leave you wanting more. Now, what I've not done is given them any money. I'm not paying for them. I'm doing that wait 24 hours and then you try the next little clip. But yeah, you can understand why they can be addictive. It's like a very different equivalent when Candy Crush and things like that came out as games and you could get hooked on that because of
Exactly.
flashy lights and you run out of credits and you can get more, get some gold here, etc. It'll be interesting to see how that progresses.
I have no doubt there's a market for it, especially in a huge market like the US. But I think the bottom line, really, and what you're saying is just, especially when it comes to journalists, in the end, it's just to be authentic and just to
Yeah.
tell your story. I have a quick fire round of questions for you. Is that supposed to
All right.
be 30 seconds, short and sweet? And then we'll wrap up, although I would love to continue the conversation. I think there's so much to touch on. The first question I have for you, is there one thing that brands you feel like they always get wrong when they pitching to journalists? If there's one thing that is a big no-no, apart from not attaching press releases.
Your company is rarely the story. So if you go in with a very egotistical sounding pitch, basically about the business, if you make it too salesy, that's not news. You need to step away outside of your company bubble and look back in and figure out what potential angles you have for stories where your company is a part of it, but not the sole story. There's a time and a place for a sole story, but that normally comes when your business is more well known, more established. Journalists come to you rather than necessarily the other way around.
Got it. Is there one brand or a brand campaign that you wish you worked on?
I just thought these were really clever at the time. This is going back a few years. I did work with them for a period, but when they were much, much smaller and younger. This was TransferWise, aka Wise now. And
Yes.
Wise built a really strong marketing team in house and they did loads of stunts. And I just thought that they were risky, but they were very smart. They got attention. So the one that always sticks out in my mind is being online flicking through news and suddenly I'm like, oh, there's Tarvit and Christo in their underwear in the middle of Liverpool Street. And it was them and their team marching in their underwear. It was all about transparency around fees. So TransferWise had nothing to hide.
Very clever. I'm a user of the platform, completely attest to that. You mentioned newsletters, and I would love to discuss this in a potential follow-up episode because I think it's such a interesting growing channel right now for PR, for sales, you name it. Do you have a favorite newsletter or podcast that you listen to or you read?
So newsletter wise, not necessarily a favorite because still all very new, but I'm actually going to mention this one specifically, but I do have to get the name because it's a bit of a plug for a journalist friend of mine who is lovely. And sadly, the publication that she was writing for let go of its team last week. So this is Tasmin Lockwood. So she was at Digital Frontier, which sadly announced earlier this week that it's made the decision to shut down while they rework stuff and come back in a new light. And Tasmin had a great newsletter there, which was called Control Alt Better. But now she's looking for a new role. Anyone listening who is in media, she's fantastic, hire her. But she has launched a new newsletter, and we just have to bear with me while I get the name of it up. So it's a personal newsletter on Substack, and it's called The Great Green Hushing Gamble. So Tasman has a big focus on climate tech in particular. She knows the tech industry really well. If you're listening and you're in that area, go check it out. So it's The Great Green Hushing Gamble.
And any podcast in particular?
You know what? Terribly, I've not been listening to very many podcasts lately. I'm a big fan of Fern Cotton's Happy Place podcast, just because she does some amazing one-on-one interviews. It's nothing to do with tech. I think I fall into that area of a bit of escapism when it comes to podcasts rather than doubling down on my industry necessarily. But the Happy Place podcast is fantastic. And also it's a bit of a self-plug because my sister works with Fern. What I've actually been doing more recently, I think just in light of the world, is I've just been escaping into fiction. I've just been reading books and gone back to paper and getting away from my phone for longer.
Yes, just take a break from what's happening. Cathy, it's been a pleasure having you and also just grabbing you for an hour from being with your baby. So really appreciate your time. Yeah, would love to continue this. It was a pleasure, Cathy. And thank you for joining us on the Media Capital podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, leave a review, follow a pod, and subscribe at mediaforgrowth.co. Thank you.